This is the Night Wolf howling at you, and this time we're going to be taking a look at the G.I. Joe Classified Series General Clayton Hawk Abernathy, usually known as General Hawk. As far as some information on him goes, his old file card says he is the G.I. Joe Commander, codename General Hawk. His SN number, I don't think we need to know. File name, Abernathy, Clayton M. Primary military specialty, Strategic Command Operations. Secondary military specialty, Artillery. Birthplace, Denver, Colorado. Grade, 07, Brigadier General. Motto, May the wings of freedom never lose a feather. In his childhood, Hawk always looked to the sky. He was fascinated by the man-made objects streaking overhead with such speed and power. He joined the military and graduated from the Officers Candidate School at West Point, served a cadre of North Atlantic Command and U.S. English Command Ever Missile and Radar Training Station. He held the position of Missile Commander until he received his General's Star and was offered command over G.I. Joe operations. His list of credits are as long as his arm. Most of his experience comes from where it counts, on the battlefield. General Hawk is the type of commander who goes out and gets shot at like everyone else. Troops respect that. They know he won't ask them to do anything he isn't willing to do himself. When the government closed down the G.I. Joe program, he was forced to work behind a desk, using this as a forum. All of his efforts went to prove terrorist organizations such as Cobra were still a threat and required a special unit to combat them. It didn't take long for the results to be shown. As enemy forces were once again on the rise, the call to arms and return of G.I. Joe team was all General Hawk needed. You can find him standing on top of a Mauler battle tank as it rolls into battle. His confidence stems from his knowledge and the abilities of his team he leads. File excerpt from Joint Chiefs of Staff. General Hawk is cleanly intelligent and perceptive, quite capable of selfless acts in support of his team, an excellent leader. That file card actually comes from one of the anniversary sets that they did a number of years ago. I can't remember when I got it, but just that I got it. So let's get the figure out, take a look at him. Here we have Hawk in his little background thing. On the back, we of course get the black and white image of him, as we have in so many previous ones. And I do actually tend to like the black and white color scheme. Here we have General Hawk in most of his glory, since he doesn't have any of his equipment with him yet. But let's take a good look at him. They did give him some gray around the temples and hairdo. Not quite as prevalent as you see in the artwork for him, but just a hint there that he's getting older. He's got a very stern-looking face, though. Also note, I believe in the original 13 Joe set back in the 80s, he was just known as Hawk back then and was just a standard member of the team. He's actually got a G.I. Joe star here on his side with Yo Joe underneath it. That seems like that's probably more of a personalized thing than probably standard military. And of course, he's got an American flag on his other shoulder. Not to sound too cynical, but I'm honestly surprised that they put the American flag on there, or that it's as detailed as it is, because it does look like it has all the stripes and all the stars. Underneath his harness, we see a number of medals. We, of course, have Abernathy under here. More medals, one of which is, of course, his general ranking, I think. Articulation wise, we've got the G.I. Joe chicken neck, although his is actually really stiff where it meets the collar of his torso. Ball joint spins around. There is a little bit of a hindrance when it comes to the his jacket collar, which I'm honestly kind of surprised that the coat isn't a separate piece from the shirt. They've done that kind of thing with a number of these figures in the past, where like CoverGirl, her jacket I believe is a separate piece from um, her shirt. Articulation wise, we have the butterfly joint, and this piece here is extremely loose. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this little bit here be that loose in a figure before. And it's not really like that on the other side, it's just the one side. Aside from that, though, we do have a ball joint up at the abs where the crunch would be. So he's got a boob cut. I use that when I talk about the women with this joint. I'm going to use that same thing with the men with that joint as well. Because the other previous G.I. Joe figures have had an actual ab crunch there and not just that. He still has the ball joint at the waist like the other G.I. Joe figures do. At least that's what it feels like, though it's very stiff. This guy needs to be dunked in some hot water to really loosen him up. Aside from the one joint here that seems to be so ridiculously loose that the piece is not staying in place. Arm hinges up, down. God, that is really starting to bother me. He does have a bicep cut, and you can spin his arm around, and it's very, very loose. Probably the same reason why that is. We've got a double jointed elbow, which is super stiff. I just caught my finger in it. Hand can spin around. What's kind of weird is if you look at his hands here, he doesn't have the standard trigger finger. He's got the arrow holding kind of hand that they use with Storm Shadow. So that's kind of weird. I wonder, was that on purpose or an accident? I wonder if they gave him the wrong hands. We have the drop down hips. We can spin the thigh around. Double jointed knee. We have a boot cut. We have the hinge at the foot, at the ankle, and we can pivot around. I don't know why, but the bottom of his boots remind me of like a pair of loafers for some reason instead of the bottom of boots. So this is Future Nightwolf, adding to the articulation on my General Hawk review. I will cut this in somewhere at the articulation point that I'm talking about, because when I did the Crimson Guard Commander customs, I got a better look at the joints, the way they were set up, and realized how much different this dude's elbow joints or shoulder joints actually are. Because like the typical butterfly joint allows it to go forward and back, right? And this part here is usually part of that butterfly joint and what the arm is attached to. However, what I noticed was that his arm shoulder can actually move in kind of a loop, and that this is still a separate piece. Now, I've only got one General Hawk, so I am not going to attempt to take him apart right now to try to figure out exactly how that joint is set up. I'm sure some other customizers have probably done that. Some other customizers. I've done a whole like 3 custom figures so far, and I'm a customizer. Well, I guess technically I am, but I ain't one of the good ones out there. So anyway, but yeah, that he's got a whole new joint system in there for his arm, giving it a little bit more leeway, which again puts it that whole thing where I think Hasbro's putting more effort into the G.I. Joe figures than I honestly would have ever would have expected. So my other thing with this is the more I've messed with this guy, the more I absolutely hate the male characters having the boob cut, because it really does not allow for a whole lot of movement. Without the ab crunch, he only goes back and forth so far. And it might literally just be because of the design of his bomber jacket here that's an issue. And if that is the reason, then that sucks. But there's not much you can do about that. So we got added articulation to the arm, and we have less articulation in the waist, or the ab area, which I think might actually, maybe that's why they did this new cut, is because whatever kind of jointing they created for this part doesn't allow for the ab crunch. But I guess we'll see in future figures that have the same shoulder joint. Anyway, and now back to the rest of the original video. So we'll set General Hawk there for a moment as we get out his equipment. All right, General Hawk comes with, what is this supposed to be exactly? Like, the barrel's big enough, because it's not a shotgun, because he actually comes with a separate shotgun. In fact, I think this is the same shotgun that came with CoverGirl, just without any paint apps on it. This almost looks like, my first thought was that this was a grenade launcher, but I don't think it is, because I don't think the barrel's big enough and it doesn't look like it's holding anything like that. But then again, I could be wrong. We've got a pistol here with a slightly extended clip. I think this might actually be a new pistol. We have another gun. It looks like God, I'm positive I know what this is called, and I can't think of the name right now. But it looks like it's designed to go into this holster, or this holster is designed to hold it. We have two separate sets of goggles. If you look at them, one's bigger than the other. And if you have a girl with a smaller finger, you could always give this to her as a ring. The smaller goggles obviously are designed specifically to go on his head, because you've got his helmet here as well with his little general star. And you can put that on his head with the goggles. Or, of course, the bigger goggle set here fits on his helmet and can be worn like that instead. As I mentioned before, I have like an anniversary. That card came from an anniversary Joe figure, which would be this one here. So comparison-wise, they keep kind of like the same articulation overall, except for the hands don't move. This was also, like I said, not an actual vintage one, but a reproduction later on for the anniversary, and you can tell because of the weird coloring that, like, all the plastic for those anniversary O-ring figures that they did a number of years ago, and I think they were all Toys R Us exclusives. They all had this kind of weird color to them. Like, none of them look natural. It's the only way I can think of to describe it. But overall, you can kind of see they sort of replicated his hairstyle from the figure a little bit. Definitely not the face, because this face is very plain, and of course, they have no gray in there. What's kind of note here is that General Hawk did come with a backpack in the olden days, but he does not have one with his new equipment. And I don't know if that's just Hasbro cheaping out on the figure or if that's just. Honestly, it's probably more Hasbro cheaping out on the figure than anything else. I do think display wise, though, if I'm going to keep the helmet on him, which I probably will, I will keep the goggles there. If we want him to hold his entire kit, so to speak, aside from the one. Well, if we did, we could still put the goggles on there and have the goggles on the helmet too. But this is where we get into that weird thing where, like, now his fingers fit around the trigger like that, and that's not very natural. So that's a little bit of a weird thing. Again, it looks like the kind of fingers that are used for holding the arrows when you have the character with the archery kit. But overall, that will conclude our look at the G.I. Joe classified General Hawk figure. Please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace and love.